Welcome to Truth Sentinel, watching over the truth in the news. Welcome to everyone listening on the digital networks such as Dark Matter Digital Network, Deep Talk Radio, and also Alien Dreams. And if anyone else is playing our episodes, please get in contact and we'll give you a shout out. Today's episode is going to be about the limitations of positive thinking, motivation for getting fit, and just general advice about life. And we're going to be talking to Anthony in Kazakhstan. Anthony K, our resident researcher, and also David Essel, one of the world's leading motivational speakers. I just wanted to point you to some of our channels first of all. You can find us on YouTube. Just find the channel Truth Sentinel with Scott, and that'll be the channel name Truth Sentinel 2. There is also another one called Truth Sentinel. You can get our episodes on the playlist there, but better to sign up to Truth Sentinel 2. If you go to our website, www.truthsentinel.co.uk, you'll find a chat room there where we post articles that we sometimes talk about. You'll find Twitter links, Facebook links, and also a voicemail. If you want to leave a comment, which we put on the show, with feedback or questions or anything really, then feel free to do that. You can also donate, of course. We really do appreciate any donations. There's a donation button at the bottom. You can also buy political t-shirts. There's another company that we've teamed up with. If you use the code TRUTH1 when you buy a t-shirt from their company, we get a very small donation, but every little bit helps. And you get a 10% discount. So today we're going to talk about a subject that we discussed once before, actually. If you look on our playlist, you'll find a playlist about Sentinel debates, and there's one about positive thinking. I'm quite a positive thinking person usually, and so I was sort of debating in favour of it, and Anthony K was more talking about the limitations of it, but we both agreed that there are limitations, and we're going to be talking a bit about that today with David Essel, our guest, who I first heard on Coast to Coast. So settle back, relax, and please enjoy today's show. First of all, we're going to go over to Anthony K, who lives somewhere near the foothills of the Himalayas in Almaty, Kazakhstan, near the highest ice rink in the world. I think it's about 1,500 meters above sea level. I might be wrong. Anthony.
Hello, Scott. How are you?
Not bad, thank you. Not bad. Thinking positive, as always. How's things with yourself?
Pretty good. I'm still over here in Kazakhstan. Caught up with an old friend yesterday. That was a lot of fun. And summer has finally come at last. So the city's looking green and probably at its best, I think.
Good, good. Nice to hear. And today we're going to continue with this feeling of positive comments and thoughts, and talk about positive thinking and maybe a little bit of motivation as well if we have time. And do you remember we had a chat probably last year now, I think, about positive thinking?
It was last year, yeah. And as I think we said then, the positive thinking movement kind of exploded onto the scene in the 90s. And so now it's 20 or 25 years later, and we can sort of look back and see what the outcomes have been. And I would say for a lot of people who have just kind of dipped into it and not taken it too seriously, positive thinking has probably been helpful, just because it reminds people that, sometimes it's good to kind of be optimistic when things aren't going so great. And obviously that's a good thing, right? But at the same time, I think we've also seen that too much emphasis on positive thinking can actually be detrimental. Yeah. First of all, when we talked about this the first time, I argued that people who get too far into the positive thinking movement can actually start losing their compassion. And if you analyze the messages of positive thinking gurus, you often find there's something a little bit akin to social Darwinism kind of woven into it. And we know, traditional social Darwinism was about applying the idea of survival of the fittest to societies, although actually Darwin himself never used this phrase, survival of the fittest. But social Darwinism sort of backed up racist theories and might is right theories, which were around, especially in the early 20th century. And they said that if one society managed to conquer or dominate another society, that's because they were naturally stronger. And so that dominance would ultimately strengthen humanity as a whole, which of course is a fairly disgusting idea.
I think it's probably linked to the eugenics movement as well.
Well, yeah, it's quite an offensive idea, but it's also very poor reasoning. Social Darwinists hardly ever stopped to take into account, the fact that different societies and groups within societies don't start on a level playing field. They don't all have the same level of economic and social privilege or access to the same natural resources. The sizes of their populations differ wildly, and so on and so on. So being more able to defeat something or someone isn't always a product of being stronger per se. It's often a product of just being in a better position to win at that particular moment. Now, the variation you find in positive thinking is that if people have misfortunes in life and can't cope with them, these people are considered psychologically weak, and they're considered to be somewhat to blame for kind of letting negative thoughts infiltrate their lives. So, in an extreme case, you can ask positive thinking devotees questions like, what about starving kids in Africa? And they'll give you crazy responses. They'll say things like, well, yes, their situation is difficult, but, maybe there's a reason. Maybe those people are surrounded by negative thoughts and they've given into negativity or whatever.
In our previous chat, you mentioned a book called The Gift of Cancer or something like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are extreme scenarios, but the idea applies as well to anyone who's, say, battling an illness, as you say, or an emotional problem and finding it really tough. A lot of positive thinkers have tended to kind of throw the onus onto these people and say, look, if you were more able to discipline your thoughts, everything would be okay, which is just a very uncompassionate thing to say to someone who's, in real trouble in their life. Closely related to that, some parts of the positive thinking movement have encouraged, I would say, very strong kind of in-group, out-group mentality, almost like you see with cults. So people who start following one positive thinking guru or another, they start forming communities where they reinforce each other's philosophy, and then they can begin like squeezing people who don't share the philosophy out of their lives because they quote unquote give off negative energy.
Similar to political movements as well, like if you support Clinton, then you surround yourself with similar people.
Yeah, absolutely. I have an acquaintance in Sydney who recently triumphantly posted that he found out that somebody on his list of Facebook friends was a Donald Trump supporter, so he defriended that person. And I wrote back and said, well, now you're just in the echo chamber. And it wasn't very well received, but never mind. Another thing that can happen is that these people can become very sensitive to criticism. And last time we talked about this, I mentioned the case of Barbara Ehrenreich, who contracted breast cancer and whose doctor advised her to join a particular online support group for breast cancer patients. It turned out that this forum was just packed with positive thinking people. And she tried their suggestions, but she found that it just really wasn't working for her. So she said that on the forum, and these people, they turned on her so ferociously. It really... it made the Scientologists look thick-skinned by comparison. So, again, there is a bit of a cult mentality there in some cases. But of course, we are talking here about people who really invest themselves in positive thinking. I mean, if you just think that a dose of optimism can be helpful in difficult times, or even if you've maybe read one or two of these books, then we're not talking about you. We're talking about the hardcore devotees.
Who believe that positive thinking alone can really change your life.
Exactly, yeah. And I think our guest today is going to talk about this. We've now seen that too much reliance on that actually reduces a person's likelihood of really acting to change their circumstances. So for a lot of strong adherents to the movement, the result is they haven't achieved success or solved their problem, because they've spent way too much time visualizing themselves as happy, successful people. And when you really boil that down, it's just daydreaming. So there was recently an environmentalist called Derek Jensen who wrote a very powerful essay, which I think relates to this somewhat. The essay was called Give Up Hope. It's the best chance we have of saving everything we love. And he argued in the essay that a lot of people within the conservation movement find themselves feeling overwhelmed by all the opposition to their plans, governments and corporations blocking them, public indifference, because I think a lot of people are sort of suffering from what you might call green fatigue now, so it's difficult to engage them on new conservation issues. And Jensen says that in that situation, too many of these conservationists just kind of retreat into this mindset where they go, okay, well, I've tried, but the obstacles are too great. So, I just hope that people will come to their senses eventually and things will turn around. Now, he says when people use hope as a substitute for action like that, it's quite dangerous. He actually quotes the story of Pandora's box, which, was a little box that had all the evils of the world in it, and Pandora opened it, and plague and sorrow and all these other horrid things flew out of the box. And afterwards, Pandora looked inside and she saw the only thing left in the box was hope, which, according to the original story, is the comfort that human beings have in the face of all these worldly evils. But Jensen says, from a certain point of view, hope actually deserved its place in the box. Because if we stop fighting for what we believe in and we just sit back and hope everything will get better, then it won't. So now I've made this diversion because I think the positive thinking movement, with all the focus on visualization and affirmations and so on, sort of does take this approach. You really have to balance the idea of remaining hopeful with other stuff, like, facing problems, owning up to the fact that sometimes you caused the problem, standing up to others and all those kinds of things. You have to find that balance. And to me, it seems that the positive thinking movement never really got anywhere near achieving that. In fact, if you had a conspiratorial mind, you might even argue that the people who have profited from this movement have led their followers so far away from that happy medium between thinking and action that they must have some kind of ulterior motive for doing that. But as you know, Scott, we're not nutty conspiracy theorists, so we would never say anything like that on this show. I mean, in terms of actual concrete results, again, we're now at the point where we can look back over the history of the positive thinking movement and we can ask how successful has it been? And it's certainly made a few people rich, but a lot of those people are the ones who, wrote positive thinking books and ran seminars, more so than people who bought the books and attended the seminars. But again, even among that first group, you find some people who've ended up desperate and depressed. And just to give you one quite dramatic example, there was a couple in the US called Lynn Rosen and John Littick, and they ran an internet radio show called The Pursuit of Happiness. It was largely about positive thinking and related self-help type stuff. And in 2013, they jointly committed suicide. They helped each other to die by wrapping plastic bags around each other's heads, and then each filled the other's bag with helium, which strikes me as a quite grisly death.
It is. What a terrible way to end for people who've written a book called The Pursuit of Happiness. It'd almost be funny if it wasn't a bit sick.
Yeah, exactly. Their show was very heavy on, positive affirmations and inspirational sayings and so on. And the author, Diane Brady, wrote about this, and she pointed out that some of the affirmations that they use, like "I accept myself completely," can actually lead to depression and anxiety, because people end up repeating words and phrases over and over again that are in direct conflict with how they actually see themselves. So it can just end up reinforcing your sense that you're somehow not good enough if you're not matching up to the words that you're constantly saying.
And it might feel like you're lying to yourself, and if you can't trust yourself, then who can you trust?
Exactly. And then you add to that, some of the things that these gurus say, and it becomes potentially quite toxic. Like, in a video that you can see on YouTube, this Lynn Rosen, one of the hosts of Pursuit of Happiness, she said, quote, "Even a brief exposure to negativity is like being drenched in an acid bath," right? Now, two things to say about that. First, obviously it's rubbish, right? And second, the people who go to these gurus are not all desperate and downtrodden, right? But some of them are. And the fact is, these momentary doubts and anxieties are perfectly normal. I mean, everybody has them, even the most successful people. But when you start telling people that just by experiencing those doubts, you're damaging yourself as much as you would by like sliding into a bath full of sulfuric acid, well, you're telling a very, I think, hurtful and damaging lie. So I think in many ways what we've seen over the last quarter of a century is that, a little dash of positive thinking can be good, but too much of it can really hurt people, or at the very least, not help them.
It can be a little bit delusional. Like, as you know, in Russia or in ex-Soviet nations, if someone smiles all the time, a lot of people think they're just mad or stupid. Whereas in some Western cultures, we're encouraged to smile and be happy all the time. But I think actually I am slightly suspicious of someone who's always happy and always smiling because, that life isn't like that. It's good to have a range of emotions, and there are negative things that occur, and it's okay to feel, to show that something bad's happened. I always like it when someone's honest with me and says how they're really feeling. A lot of people try to put on a public face and pretend things are positive when it's just far better to say how you're really feeling.
Yeah, and I don't think it necessarily does you good to continue that pretense. You mentioned the ex-Soviet countries, and Westerners who go and spend time in those countries regularly complain about the terrible customer service because it is. Not always, but often. But I had a student in Ukraine, Alexei, who went and lived in England for a year, and he said he hated the customer service in England. And when he got back to Ukraine, he was so relieved. And the reason why is because he said, in England, when you walk into a shop, you never meet a real person because you never find out how that person is feeling. You don't see anything of them. You just see the smile that they're obliged to project outwards into the world. And then he came home to Ukraine, and as you know, the situation is quite different. If the person in the shop is having a great day, you will feel that. If they're having a terrible day, you will feel that. Yeah, so he had quite a different perspective on it. I thought that was interesting.
He should be honest as well, because sometimes in shops in Ukraine I've walked in and they don't even look up at me. They're just on their phone, and that's down to being rude rather than just expressing how they're feeling.
Well, there certainly is that. Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, as I said, now the movement has a history. I think we can take some lessons from it and treat it with a little bit of caution. And I think our guest today is probably going to agree with me.
Yeah, I think he does agree with you, and he sort of agrees with your stance in our previous chat, Positive Thinking, which you can find on our Sentinel Debates playlist if you go to our YouTube channel. But yeah, we've got David Essel with us today, who's going to talk about the limitations of positive thinking. As most people know, there's a balance to all these things. As we were just talking about, smiling all the time. It might not be healthy if that's not exactly how you're feeling. It's good to be honest and show a balance of emotions. So let's go over to David now. Our next guest is David Essel. He's the author of books such as Slow Down, The Fastest Way to Get Everything You Want, and Positive Thinking Will Never Change Your Life, but This Book Will, The Myth of Positive Thinking, The Reality of Success. Those are just two of the books David has written over a career spanning over 30 years. As well as being a life coach, counselor, and motivational speaker, David is a TV and radio host and helps inspire people to reach their goals in business and in relationships. I was saying to David before the show, where he finds the time for all this, I just don't know. David, welcome to Truth Sentinel.
Scott, it's wonderful to be with you. Absolutely excited. Looking forward to the interview.
So am I. I thought I'd start off just by talking about the complicated world we live in and how difficult it is for some people most of us actually, to keep track of everything, finances, pursuing a career, cultivating relationships, both personal and in business, keeping ourselves in tip-top condition by eating the right foods and doing the required amount of exercise, getting the right amount of sleep, avoiding the temptations of addictions, and still finding the time for relaxation and leisure time. So it's no wonder that people want to reach out to a life coach sometimes. And I just wondered, what do you do as a life coach? In what ways do life coaches try and help people?
Scott, one of the things you just said is why life coaches are so important and why our business is so strong is that people are stressed to the max these days. And when they come to a coach, at least the way that we do our coaching, there's a lot of different philosophies in life coaching, just like there's a lot of different philosophies in counseling. But in our world of life coaching, Scott, we help people to prioritize of all those areas in life that you're talking about, the mind, the body, relationships, some people's spiritual path, finances, career, relaxation, hobbies. What we do is we ask people to prioritize the one area that is creating the most havoc. It isn't possible to multitask major goals in life. So we help people to sort through and to figure out which one is the one that if we were able to turn around would have a great impact on the rest of their life. And then, Scott, we narrow in on that one and we purely only work on that one area, that goal, until we've got it in a good positive direction before we would add any other goals in life. And by doing that, For the past 25 plus years, we've seen people radically change their life by getting highly focused in order to accomplish one big goal at a time.
That sounds quite sensible. Do you sometimes find that people are maybe focusing on the wrong goal? Like some people are looking for financial success just because they feel like they should be, but actually it's not as important to them as they think, or, that maybe there's some other goal that would be more fulfilling to them.
Beautiful question, Scott. 75% of people that come in as a client will come in with a goal that they think is the priority, and within 4 weeks they will find out that it may not even be in the top 3. It's incredible. Again, over 25 years of experience in watching people come in and say, I really need to lose this weight. And here's a great example. A couple of weeks ago, I was working with a woman, and she came in and she's 200 pounds overweight, and she said, David, I need the best exercise. I need the best diet, exercise, and relaxation techniques from you so I can lose this weight. But what we found within a couple of weeks of working, Scott, that it really wasn't the type of food she was eating. She was an emotional eater. So the food she was eating were fine, but she was eating constantly. So it wasn't that we had to change her diet. We had to get into why. What are the emotions that you're running from? The boredom, the shame, the guilt, the resentment, the frustration. And when we started working on those emotions, which she had no idea we were going to go in that direction, then the food started to become less and less, and she started finding time to exercise. So it was a great question you posed. Most people, when they come in, they really aren't quite aware of what the most important goal to work on is. And that's the role of a life coach, is to help people prioritize, set up a goal, and then hold them accountable.
And I suppose with the internet, people are bombarded all the time with different ways they're supposed to get fit and diet and get healthy. And it becomes very confusing, and people try out all these pills and new methods, and there's lots of conflicting advice. So I guess one thing that a life coach does, I presume, then is try and make things a bit clearer.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. We believe that there are a lot of supplementations out there, and we'll just stay with weight loss, that could help people to decrease their cravings for foods. Some of the most important ones are some of the ones that people don't know a lot about, like amino acids, that can help actually regulate brain chemistry so people aren't craving. And the craving is usually from an emotional perspective. So, we help them get on the right supplements, but not like the fat burners and all those other kind of things. We don't believe in those. But we do believe that there are certain supplements that can really help people to get their mind set. And then we can look at what are the emotions that are eating them that they eat to cover up. And the success rate can be off the charts, Scott.
That sounds great. I mean, you used to be a sports psychologist as well, I believe. And in sports psychology, people often talk about visualization, visualizing yourself scoring a goal, for example, believing and positive thinking. But I heard you on Coast to Coast saying that maybe positive thinking has its limitations. And could you talk a little bit about that?
Oh my gosh, yes. Our new book that came out, Positive Thinking Will Never Change Your Life, but this book will. The myth of positive thinking, the reality of success, is rocking the world of personal growth, Scott. And I wrote it. One of the reasons I wrote it was because for a number of years I was on the positive thinking bandwagon, telling people that if they said the right affirmations and visualized correctly on a daily basis, they could radically change their life. But it rarely happens unless it's a miracle. And we're not saying that positive thinking isn't good, and we're not saying it isn't powerful, but we're just saying it doesn't hold the promise that many people have been taught that it holds. That if you just change your thinking, you can change your life. That if you believe it, you can achieve it. All of those cute little sayings are nice, but they're not realistic because they don't work. What we've found in our work is that positive thinking and visualization will account for about 20% of someone's major goal accomplishments in life. That's it, 20%. 80% will come from changing what they do, how they act, what they accomplish on a daily basis. And 20%, Scott, will be the power of the mind. And in the book, I talk about, my attitude about it is the first hour of every day, I dive into affirmation, meditation, gratitude, prayer, visualization. And I use that first hour to get my mind and body and soul, spirit up and running. But then after that, it's really what do we do on that day that's going to lead us to long-term changes with our weight, our finances, our relationships, and more.
Yeah, and I think most people actually do know what they need to do, but it's usually something that's going to be a bit painful, with exercise. There is a fairly simple calculation. The more, if you do more exercise and burn more calories than you're consuming, you're probably going to lose weight. But sounds quite simple, but getting yourself into the mind frame where you actually push yourself to do that sort of 1 or 2 hours of exercise a day is the difficult part, I suppose.
Yeah, it is. And we've procrastinated for a long time. We've put it off. We've come up with all kinds of reasons that we bought into about not having the time and not having this and not having that. And so the longer we've held those beliefs, Scott, about how we don't have time or we're genetically always going to be overweight, which is a real erroneous thought. According to the University of Florida study a number of years ago, of all the people who are overweight or obese, only about 6% have a genetic link, which means 94% of people who are overweight or obese, it has nothing to do with genetics. So breaking that mindset that I don't have time because I'm working 2 jobs or I've got 3 kids, I'm a single mom, I'm a single dad, or whatever the beliefs are, we've got to find a way to get through them. And that's, again, the role of a coach, a life coach, is to help set a plan and help that person to be held accountable to any major change.
Right, yeah. And I heard you also talking a bit about the conscious mind and the subconscious mind with George in relation to achieving goals. Can you go into that a little bit as well?
Oh, Scott, this is so important. This might be the most important thing that you and I talk about with your listeners today. And it's something we go into great detail in the book about that. The conscious mind would be the mind that says, okay, I'm listening to Scott and David. That's it. Tomorrow I'm starting my exercise program. And it sounds great. And we might even share it with someone. Or maybe if we're afraid to be held accountable, we'll keep it to ourselves. But that conscious mind says, I'm not going to buy any more cookies. I'm not going to buy any more candy. I'm not going to drink anymore. Tomorrow morning I get up and I'm going to go to the gym or I'm going to go for a walk around my neighborhood or something. Now, the next morning comes and the alarm goes off an hour early and we look at that and we go, you know what? I really deserve this sleep. I need to sleep. Last night I didn't sleep that good. I'm going to start tomorrow, but I can't do it now. That right there, that decision was made by the subconscious mind. Because it doesn't make sense logically. Even though we come up with all these rationalizations why we were going to start today, but it's got to be now tomorrow, that was done by the subconscious mind. And what does that mean? The subconscious mind only cares about one thing, that we keep living life just like we are in this very moment. It doesn't view, if you don't get up in the morning to exercise when you said you're going to, the subconscious mind says, okay, that's great. We're not going to change the routine. We're not going to break the routine. It doesn't know the difference, Scott, between a healthy change or an unhealthy change. All it cares about is keeping life in the same level it is right now, which is why it's so hard to change something that we haven't done. It's why it's so hard for people to quit drinking or smoking or eating sugar. It's why it's so hard for people who have not exercised to get into it, because the only thing the subconscious cares about is staying in the known, what we're doing right now. And so to change that takes a really concerted effort.
I think I know what you mean. I think my subconscious mind often tells me that just that little chocolate can't possibly have enough calories in it to do any damage. But then 10 minutes later, I'll take another one, and it feels like I'm trying to trick the system, but it doesn't work,
Yeah, it doesn't. And so, your subconscious mind has said, we deserve this.
Yeah.
We deserve this chocolate. We deserve to relax. I mean, it's not like I'm doing heroin or something. Chocolate is fine. Actually, I can go on the internet and find studies that show that the antioxidants in chocolate are healthy.
Yeah, I think I've used that one as well. Yeah.
So that's the subconscious mind saying, no, don't stop this pattern. Even if the pattern isn't healthy, Scott, The subconscious wants to stay there. And that's where we truly, all of us, when it comes to making a major change, we need accountability partners. We need a written plan. We need a massive mental and physical commitment. But the great news is this. Some people may not look at this as great news, but it is. If you've struggled with food or a lack of exercise or alcohol or anything for a number of years, it will probably take 12 months, 365 days of doing the opposite in order to turn the subconscious around. But once it's turned around, you're good to go for life.
Yeah, because actually in myself, I'm going down this road, and I'm actually making a lot of progress at the moment for the first time in many years. And I wondered, like, once you achieve your goal in fitness and you become fit and healthy, it must also be quite difficult to stay there. Do you have any tips for maintaining that healthy lifestyle?
Well, Scott, if we can do that for a year, if we can see those great changes for a year, then all we need to do is repeat what we've done to get here. So the effort can become less because it becomes the known, it becomes a habit. So the effort is actually less to maintain it. I've worked with people that have lost 100 and 120 pounds in a year with our program. And a number of years later, when I ask them how they're doing and, how's their effort level, they'll always say things like, David, it's just like brushing my teeth now. It's effortless. There's no more work. I just know that every day I get up at 6 o'clock and I'm in the gym at 7, or every day at 5 o'clock on the way home, I stop at the gym. I haven't missed a day in years. It's like it just becomes who we are, Scott.
What about the, that program, The Biggest Loser, where they've got the motivation of, the more they lose, that they could potentially win a lot of money. But some of those guys, some of them actually the weight stays off, but some of them it just comes back on later on. How would you explain that?
Well, you know what? I have a very strong opinion. I hate that show. I think it's disgusting. The New York Times just did a huge article about 3 weeks ago on The Biggest Loser. And there's this massive, I want to say like 80% or something like that of the people are back to their original weight within a year. It is the most disgusting show on earth, I believe, because you're leading people to slaughter, Scott. You're taking these people that are 300, 400 pounds. You're putting them into a fat farm. You're taking them out of their daily routines. They have personal trainers. This one guy's story, he worked out 8 hours a day to lose all of this weight. He lost over 200 pounds in like 8 months. And then when he went back he had to go back to work. He couldn't work out 8 hours a day. So they set these people up for failure, Scott. It disgusts me.
It does seem like they'd have some problems after the show. But when it comes to sort of pushing yourself to become motivated to lose weight, what helps some people seem to be able to be so self-motivated and to push themselves so hard, like to actually become athletes without that motivation of something like The Biggest Loser with the money? How can you sort of try and get that same kind of motivation level?
Well, one of the things, Scott, is that we've got to figure out why is it that we self-sabotage ourselves. Like, here we go back into the world of psychology. We've got to figure out, why is it that I've let myself go? Why is it that I haven't learned how to deal with emotions? Like, when we look at weight gain, one of the biggest reasons, if not the biggest reason for weight gain, is that we have not learned how to deal with emotions in life. And that's why it's called emotional eating. So we've got to figure out, what emotions have I not learned to deal with that I use food? Because, food is a drug. And within a minute or two, sugar, salt, white flour go right to the brain, and they have a numbing effect on emotion. So if we're bored and we reach out for food, within a short period of time, we don't feel bored anymore because that emotion has been numbed. If we're anxious, if we're nervous, if we're worried about money, if we have resentments against people in the past, and we don't learn how to cope with those emotions, Scott, then we're going to reach for something. And in our process of helping people to get motivated, we teach them and help them find for themselves, what are the emotions I'm running from? How can I deal with them in a healthy way? And one of the healthiest ways would be, of course, exercise. But until you know what emotion you're running from, we can't really set a great long-term plan. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Are you sort of saying that unhappiness can make people want to reach for food to sort of combat that and make themselves happy,
Exactly, because it does have such a numbing effect. You know, these foods have such a numbing effect. The other thing is that if you were raised in a family where mom or dad or sister or brother relied on food and they celebrated with food, and when they felt bad, they ate food, and you had role models that used food as a way to cope with life, then you have, you know, depending on how long you lived at home, 15, 18, 21 years of that becoming ingrained in your subconscious as a healthy way to deal with food, even if it isn't just through the repetition of the role model.
So you think that people around you can sometimes help you, but can also hinder you? If you've got, say, parents that are giving you huge helpings every day when you come home from school, are they not partly responsible for this?
You know, the tough thing about being a child is that you don't know this. You know, when you're a child, you can't differentiate. You just think mom and dad are being very kind, very nice, and all those things. But as we get older, then we have to start doing what you said, and we have to start looking at the people in our life and to say, okay, like we even have an exercise, Scott, we give people where we ask them to write down all the people that they email, call, text, or see on a regular basis every 2 weeks. And this is a brutal exercise because next to each one, then we have them write, is this person healthy for me or unhealthy? And we have these lists. There was a gentleman I did this with a couple weeks ago, and about 50% of the people that he hangs out with on a weekly basis, either via text, phone call, or in person, are not healthy. They're complainers, they're victims, they're trying to get them to go out and drink on a regular basis just to relax and just to socialize. But 50% of the people that he hangs out with can sabotage his goals. So now he's got to do a whole redirect, spend less time with those people, and bring more people into his life who are healthier. But you know what, Scott? If he didn't do this exercise in writing, he never would have seen the truth.
And I suppose some of those people you could say might be negative thinkers as well. Isn't that one area where it's good to preach a little bit of positive thinking, because some of the negative thinking people do sort of sap the energy of some of the people around them.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and let's call those, you know, those would be the negative influencers in your life. And if whenever you call someone, they're complaining, they're negative, they're gossiping, they're saying how life isn't fair, their partner's not fair, their boss isn't fair, you've got to learn a way to disengage and to spend less time with them and fill that time with other people that are more proactive and more positive, because that is a huge issue in our society where people just love to be a victim, Scott, love to complain about everything. And if you allow it, then you're enabling that and you're decreasing your chances to be successful. That's just the brutal truth.
Right, yeah. Moving on to another area, basically relationships. Many people have problems finding the person of their dreams, and I know you've covered this a bit in some of your books. I saw one book, Angel on a Surfboard, seemed to be relating to finding true love. Can you share any wisdom for those people out there trying to find a partner? Is there any help you can give them?
Oh my gosh, Scott, Angel on a Surfboard was such an amazing book to write, and it really was about true love. And one of the things we say to people is, before you're out there searching for that perfect lover, write the characteristics that you think that perfect lover would have. Not necessarily just the physical ones, but, you know, are they kind? Are they honest? Are they trustworthy? Are they communicative? Whatever you think is good for you. And then the next exercise is evaluate how you are in each of those categories. And this sounds like so opposite of what people talk about when they talk about the soulmate. But what we want people to do is we want people to realize that in order for you to attract really healthy people, you've got to be healthy. And that's what Angel on the Surfboard was about. You know, the mystery surfer that's coming back to teach these people about love says that we've got to be able to love ourselves first. We have to be able to be on a good path to treat ourselves well physically and mentally and spiritually in order to have a chance to have a great relationship and not be looking for someone to save us or not be looking for someone to help us in some way. It's like we've got to be set in ourselves. So that's step number one. And then the second step that we write about in our new book, Positive Thinking Won't Change Your Life, is we say, what are the deal killers in love? What are those things that you've experienced with a partner in the past that have never worked? Write them down. It could be that that you've been in relationships before where people have taken advantage of you, or maybe you've been in relationships with people that drink too much, or maybe you've been in relationships with people who are selfish, or whatever it might be. And we say whatever didn't work before isn't going to work in the future. So if you have those 3 or 4 deal killers and you meet someone and you might emotionally fall for them, but they have one of those deal killers, you've got to have the strength to walk away, because if it didn't work for you, that characteristic in the past, it's only going to create more hurt now. And those are some of the greatest tips we can give regarding people who are single looking for love.
That sounds like good advice. But similar to the issues with weight loss, you might have found your perfect partner, but then the story's not over. You've got to keep that partner. So, any tips or strategies of how to make your partner stick around?
Okay, here's a great one that we just went through with a couple last week, Scott. Is that when there's a disagreement, because there's always going to be disagreements in relationships. When there's a disagreement, and people are arguing or battling through it or whatever they're doing, at some point after that argument, I ask my couples to write down what their role was in the dysfunction, and then to tell their partner that, we argued this morning or we argued yesterday about X, and I'm going to share with you what my part of that problem is. I became too determined. I wanted to be right. I wanted to make sure you were wrong. And I apologize for that. That's one of the greatest tools that couples can use to keep love strong, is when you're humble and you're vulnerable and you admit the part of the argument or the disagreement, the role that you had that was inappropriate.
Yeah, that sounds like common sense as well. What about negative events? We all experience negative events and trauma. Some more than others, unfortunately, and adversity. Do you think those can actually be used as a tool for motivation to succeed?
They can, Scott, but it usually isn't very soon after the event happens. If someone's in a deep financial crisis, or someone's in a relationship crisis, or lose someone they love, or gets fired from their job, or struggles with a deep depression, all of those can be used down the road as motivational tools to become more successful. But I don't ever want to have someone feel like in the middle of one of these traumatic events that they should be bigger than, stronger than, and use it as a way to heal. Not too quickly. I mean, you're asking almost the impossible. When people are in trauma, what we get them to do is we get them to journal on a daily basis about the pain, the discomfort, the unfairness. We actually ask them to go into the trauma on a daily basis in writing. And then at the very end of their writing of the day, we ask them to try to find one thing that went well, just even if it's something small. In that way, Scott, we're processing the trauma instead of letting it build up. And when it builds up interiorly, it builds up at the cellular level, which can lead to things like addiction, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, adrenal fatigue, and so many other physical manifestations when people are not processing in writing the trauma they're currently going through.
And do you think other people around them can help a bit? I guess that's where positive thinking might not be the right time, when they're going through some kind of trauma. And, people always sort of say, well, they want to cheer these people up. But do you think that's not the key then, to cheer them up, but to let them deal with it?
Yeah, that is a great question. And the answer is you're 100% correct. Quit being the cheerleader for someone who's in trauma. Sit and shut up and listen. Because what they need the most is they need to vent. Don't give them advice. Don't tell them that things are going to be better, that you're going to work through this, that everything's going to be fine. Sit in their pain and allow them to express it to you. That would be the most incredible friend that they could ever have. And there's very few people that have someone like that in their life when they're in pain.
What about people who maybe aren't experiencing a trauma or adversity, but just are depressed. They're probably suffering from depression. How do they get out of that dark hole that, there's obviously friends around them, they want to help, but they just, I guess this person is the only person who can really help themselves. How do you deal with that kind of situation?
Well, the number one thing is to work with a professional. That's number one. Don't try to figure out depression, deep depression, clinical depression, or anxiety on your own. Scott, we need professionals to help us, number one. Number two, in our work, what we've seen is most depression is caused by submerged emotions over the years. So most depression is caused because we've never really looked at our anger that we have, our resentments at ourselves or others, our insecurities, our shame, our guilt over things that we've done in the past or maybe are still doing now. And so when we start to explore those submerged emotions, just in the journaling, the writing, we can start to relieve some of that pain. But I still going to go back to my first statement. In combination with the journaling, work with professionals. There's country organizations, there's church organizations, there's all kinds of groups that will have sliding scale fees, Scott, to help people who are really, really struggling, but don't try to do it alone.
And do you think people should try and help and inspire people around them, a bit like a sort of life coach? Do you think it could be a source of happiness for other people as well?
Yeah, if someone has a burning desire to work with others who are in pain, then I would say take that desire and become a coach or a counselor or a minister or something where that you can get the training necessary. Because Scott, something you mentioned earlier, a lot of times in our best effort, we think that when our friend is down, the most important thing we could do is be a cheerleader and lift them up. But that's not actually true. It's a misnomer. And if people want to be professionals and really help, they'll be trained that we never are going to constantly be with someone saying, come on, you can do it. This isn't going to last forever. We can help you get through it. That's not what those people need. They need someone to say, tell me more. Tell me more about how you're feeling. Let me know where you think this is coming from. How long has this been going on? When did it start? Are there people that you have a lot of resentment with that you've got to figure out on your own how to work through? Are you angry at yourself for things that you continue to do that aren't correct? Do you need to get rid of that? See, these are all questions a professional would ask that a best friend would not have a clue, Scott, where to begin.
Right, yeah. Fair enough. Moving on to success and achieving success. There's many people who believe in order to get success, they need to work hard. And there's probably, I'm sure there's some truth in that. We were talking about positive thinking and how really you should take action. And these people are taking action. They're working hard, but they're working so hard that they don't have time for anything else and maybe suffering from stress. What's the best way to ensure that these workaholics are sort of setting time aside for relaxation?
Beautiful, beautiful question, Scott. On a daily basis, we believe that people who are working hard have to exercise, number one. If it's a 30-minute brisk walk, an hour in the gym, a minimal of a 30-minute fast walk. For people that are working hard, you've got to find the time. First thing in the morning, we ask people who are really working hard to take a half an hour to be with yourself. If you believe in a higher power, you believe in God, you believe in something bigger than you, great. If you don't, great. Write about what you appreciate in life. First thing in the morning, first 30 minutes. If people who are working really hard did these two things, spent 30 minutes every morning with themselves writing about what they're appreciative of, and made sure they got at least 30 minutes or an hour every day into exercise, that would help dramatically decrease the stress response.
So it doesn't have to be a long time, just some time.
Yeah, and it has to be consistent, Scott. The third thing I would say would be to get in nature. At least twice a week, to sit in a park, to sit by a river, by the ocean, in the mountains, at least twice a week to immerse yourself in nature, even for just 30 minutes. That would probably be the third most important key to avoid burnout.
Right, yeah. And just a final question. If there's someone listening who wants to follow their dreams, they've got a dream and they want to achieve something, what's the first thing they really need to do to get on the road to that, achieving that dream?
Scott, number one is to write it down. I want to be X. I want to achieve Y. I want to accomplish Z. Whatever that is, lose weight, certain amount of weight, make a certain amount of money, write a certain number of books, fall in love, whatever it is. Step number one is to write it down. Step number two would be to write out the daily steps necessary that they have to take at least 5 days a week to begin accomplishing their goal. And step number three is, what time of day are they going to do those steps? That would be the formula to begin your goal achievement process.
Great. I hope someone out there is inspired to take that first step today to achieving their dreams. And I wanted to thank you, David, for coming on and sharing some of these wise tips. And can you give us details of your website and your radio show so people can go and find out more?
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, if they go to our website, talkdavid.com, T-A-L-K David.com, they can get the first chapter of our new book, Positive Thinking Will Never Change Your Life, absolutely free, so they can get a sense of what we're talking about, which I think is crucial. So just go to talkdavid.com to get your free chapter 1 of the book. And then at that website, Scott, they can find out all the other stuff that we do in order to help them move on to the next level of life. And it's just really easy to remember, talkdavid.com.
That's excellent. And thank you again. You've been a real help, and I'm sure you've motivated someone out there and inspired someone. And we all need a good motivational talk from time to time. And I hope maybe sometime you could come back and join us again in the future.
Oh, Scott, I would love to. This has been an absolute blast being on the show with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You've been most welcome. Thank you, David. And take it easy. Enjoy yourself on the road with the work you're doing.
You bet, Scott.
Thanks.
Okay, good. You have a great week too, Scott. Thanks, man.
Thanks, David. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye now.
So thanks for listening to today's show. Hope you enjoyed it. What do you think? Is positive thinking overrated? And did any of the tips that David Essel gave today, did any of them help you at all? Let us know. Contact us, scottsentinel9@gmail.com, or leave a voicemail, www.truthsentinel.co.uk. Find us on YouTube, just type in Truth Sentinel with Scott, and find the channel Truth Sentinel 2. Look at the playlist. There's about over 60 episodes there now. We've covered things like cryptozoology, MH370, missing planes, honor killings, conspiracy theories, Egyptian pyramids, human head transplants, forensics, space-related topics, and a lot more. And you'll find guests such as Sean Stone, son of Oliver, refugee activist Gabriela Andreevska, Jasvinder Sangira, L.A. Marzulli, Brian Forster, Gareth Ike, Rosemary Ellen Guiley, Douglas Dietrich, and lots more. And we hope to have lots more guests in the future. If you feel like suggesting one, just contact us and we'll do our best. Let us know if there's a topic you want us to talk about. We travel around the world, by the way, funding ourselves. So yeah, please donate if you can. And we travel around to different countries, and sometimes the location we're in is connected to the news, and otherwise we just talk about the news in general. We have episodes where we just look at news articles that we found interesting and talk about them, and sometimes we get guests as well, as you know from listening to this episode. So anyway, enough of me waffling on. Enjoy your week, and please join us again for the next episode. Thank you. Goodbye.